Labuschagne was a successful safari operator in Zimbabwe, but his life collapsed in a single moment when he was unjustly convicted of murder in December 2000. He was sentenced to 15 years in a Zimbabwean prison and moved through some of the country's toughest facilities. After 10 years behind bars, he was finally released. His new book, Beating the Chains, tells the story of what he endured and how he rebuilt his life. And I'm so happy to have Rassie with me in the studio today. Hi, Rassie. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, Linda. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, we have to, ask you, how did you survive that decade?
Yeah, Linda, maybe I should start off by telling everyone what I went through and where I come from. Would that be okay?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I'm a fourth generation Zimbabwean from a cattle ranching background. Grew up, I lost my dad at 12, boarding school at 6, so life was tough. Grew up very humble beginnings, boarding school all my life, and then was crazy about rugby and water polo, and managed to play rugby for Zimbabwe for several tests, but I was always a bushman. I mean, I grew up on farms. So I went into the safari business, and after a little while realized that I could make as much money as these guys I'm working for, and I started my own business. And by the year 2000, life was fantastic. I was flying my own airplane. I had 5 safari concessions, a fishing resort on Lake Kariba in Zimbabwe, flashy cars, houseboats, a huge property in Bulawayo. So life was wonderful. And in 2000, there was the land invasion chaos that started. And unfortunately, it made the population feel entitled to anything. So there was conflict with my fishing resort on Lake Kariba and a fishing cooperative that was nearby. They were netting all the time in an area they weren't allowed to, which was where my fishing resort was. And whenever you're an operator, a safari operator, whether you're fishing or guiding or hunting, you're responsible for anti-poaching. So I was always cutting their nets and apprehending them. So there was conflict. And I was with a bunch of friends on a fishing trip, and I saw 2 poachers that I knew, notorious guys. I drove my boat towards them late one evening with a friend of mine, and it was about 5:30 in the evening, and if I had arrested them, it was 2 hours to the authorities there and 2 hours back. So I just wanted to scare them off, and I went towards them in my boat, turned the boat, and the wake of the boat caused their boat to tilt, and they jumped out into the water, which was about 1.5 meters deep, and they were about 3 meters from the shore. They soon scrambled to dry land and ran off into the bush, thinking nothing more of it. My friend and I thought nothing more of it. And the following day, the police arrived with one of them and accused of drowning the other one. And to cut a long story short, I was framed by the poacher, the police, and the courts in an ugly, politically influenced conspiracy, because it got very political up to presidential level. There was a judge trying to help me. He got thrown in prison, not impeached. So it was quite a free-for-all during that time in Zimbabwe with the land invasions. Anyway, so on the 3rd of April 2003, I was convicted of drowning that poacher. No one drowned, no evidence, and without a body, against police evidence. A lot of the police evidence was in my favor. But it was very political. And like I said, it got to presidential level where there was a war between the judge and the president, and unless I was guilty, they couldn't prosecute the judge. And that's what happened. And, before I went in, before the judgment, I was phoned by a very powerful political figure. And he said, "Russ, you're going to prison. Get out." And just a message for the viewers, Linda, is your reputation. You work your whole life for your reputation, and you can lose it in a second. And I could have run, but I would have left my family, my friends, everything I'd worked my whole life for, and the whole infrastructure that I built in all those years. And I would have been running, guilty, and never come back again. And I still have my reputation today. And I'll touch on it later, but if it happened again, I would never leave. Just for I think people have lost the value of your word. When you have a reputation and you stand to your word, that's what it is. And I feel that we've lost that a little bit. But anyway, I'm going off track. Linda, the conditions were unimaginable. I got 15 years and I had to serve 10. So 5 were removed as remission. But the cells were 13 meters long by 3 meters wide, and we were 79 guys. So everybody got 33 centimeters marked out on the walls in chalk. That was your space. For the first 8 years, only one set of clothing was allowed at any one time. A standard white short-sleeve shirt and a pair of drawstring white shorts. Underwear was forbidden. After 6 months, you got a change of clothing. Sometimes. Other times, after 9 months, leaving us walking around in tatters. As cushioning against the cold concrete floor, you'd fold 2 of your paper-thin, worn-out, lice-ridden blankets several times to fit your 33 centimeters. And your clothes were wrapped around your toothbrush and toothpaste, or that'd get stolen, and that was your pillow. The lice were unimaginable, Linda. They bit you day and night, and they left weeping, itchy blisters. In 2005, I was transferred to Chikurubi Maximum Security Prison after 1 year. And in 2005, Harare City ran out of water. For 3 years, 2,200 prisoners were allocated only 1 plastic cup of water a day. That was dirty orange city runoff water from a nearby dam carried by farm prisoners. That was to drink, clean your teeth, wash your face, bath, everything for 3 years. 3 years. And then in the first 6 years I was there, I watched over 2,200 guys die. I'll repeat that. My first 6 years, I watched over 2,200 guys die. It was primarily from malnutrition and disease. It was during the cholera outbreak and during the Zimbabwe crash. During the cholera outbreak, there was no food outside of prison on the shelves in the streets, never mind in the prison. And I was transferred to a medium security prison, Harare Central Prison, and there were 1,200 of us there. And in 8 months during that cholera outbreak, 432 guys died, more than 1/3 of us. In 1 weekend, 22 guys died. Linda, I'm going to stop at all the horrors there because they can carry on. It was, yeah, unbelievable. And I went from flying high, thinking I was bulletproof, to losing everything, being pushed so low that you have to dig really deep to find solutions to get through there, but you grow. You learn lessons others never have to. And I found a part of myself that I never knew about, Linda. And people will say, oh, you got a smiling face for what you went through and all that. But the life lessons I learned on that journey, and like before prison, it was all about me, my empire, money, more and more. And I had no purpose in life. And now I'm a motivational speaker, speaking all over the world, and it's not about me. It's about helping others and making a difference in other people's lives. And I now have a purpose. I can now see how I found the Lord also in prison, but I'll touch on that a little bit later. But now see the Lord supernaturally drew me away from the outdoor safari life that I love so dearly to find my purpose. He has taken me from humble upbringings to great success, mixing with the world's elite with the safari business, flying in private jets across the world, etc. Then been put through that nightmare and losing everything I'd worked my whole life for, but he has prepared me for this calling. And believe it or not, Linda, I thank God for my 10 years in prison. because I'm a better person now than I would ever have been. I'm stronger. I know God better. I understand people more. And I believe it's made me able to reach out to people to tell them that you can recover from anything life throws at you. Let me put it this way. Do you think anyone can ever fully recover from a terrible setback like that in life? When you're looking at somebody that did, you're looking at living proof that you can recover from whatever life throws at you. And no matter what hardships you're going through in life, just remember you're being prepared for where you're going. God has a plan for each and every one of us. And some of the other life lessons I learned, Linda, is forgiveness, I think, was the biggest lesson I learned. You know, I was so full of anger, hatred, and bitterness. I had plans for every one of them that were involved in my conviction, and I knew all the figures that were involved. And then one day I realized that it was after about a year, and I was walking in the exercise yard, and I was tired of all the anger, hatred, and bitterness that was draining me daily. And I looked up, and I just said, Lord, take care of them. What goes around comes around. That they'll get what they deserve. And I wasn't a Christian then. But the weight, the immediate feeling of like release, like it's not mine anymore. It's like I had this secret that I was keeping from my mates for years and years, so scared it was going to get out, and then I let it go. And people must realize that forgiveness is not, it doesn't affect you, and it doesn't change you. It doesn't change the person that hurt you, sorry. Forgiveness doesn't change anyone that hurt you. Forgiveness changes you. And you can look at it in two ways. You can forgive, forget, and move forward, or you can retain, remember, and regret. The choice is yours. But if you say, I'll forgive, but I'll never forget, then you still remember and will never move forward. And I don't mean forget the lessons learned from the incident. Just don't revisit the pain. You can't bounce back from anything unless you forgive those who you believe have done you wrong. And only when you forgive and let go of the past can you be fully free to move forward with your full potential. Gratitude was also huge, Linda. You know, we all want so much in our lives, and we concentrate on what we haven't got instead of being grateful for what we have. But when you lie in a cell with 78 people and your breath is not even your own, and gratitude suddenly has a different meaning altogether. And gratitude was huge for me. Hope was massive. If I had to say one word that got me through there, it was hope. Hope for me was like the anchor of my soul. It enabled me to see that there's light despite all the darkness. And I want to say to everyone, let your hopes, not your troubles, shape your future. And never look for hope outside of yourself. The answers are in you. If you'd said to me in year 1, you're going home in year 3, I would have said never. I'm going home now. Like 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, I've got to live with. Anything beyond that was too painful. Like if I thought about my fiance with another guy, or my mates on fishing trips or trips to Vegas we went every year for marketing, it was too painful. So I blocked those out. I counseled myself on how to think through the physical impact my thoughts had on me. And to be able to find happiness in even the smallest things that happen in prison kept me healthy. Those who couldn't died. Life in prison or in Las Vegas is still just life. It's what you make of it, no matter where you are. And I had everything I could ever wish for. And in moments, it was all gone.
So this is what you relate in your book. One thing I've wondered about, what about trust? How do you regain trust, in this journey?
Yeah, no, Linda, that's a huge thing, because we grew up, most of us in my era, so I'm 65 this year, and most of us in that era, born in the 60s, grew up with rejection issues. and fear of failure issues. And that builds unforgiveness. And trust is huge in that. You don't trust anyone, because as soon as somebody lets you down, you also think that you failed. And you don't step out bravely to do anything, whether you in business, whether you're praying for somebody, you're just scared that it won't work, and then you failed again. And I think we all carry that. We don't walk in the confidence that we should. So trust for me was huge. Yeah. So I don't trust the system anymore. And when you go to prison as an innocent man, a lot of stuff goes on in your head. And I always believed, and I always told my kids, everything happens for a reason. And now I had to walk my talk and understand that, which is very tough in there. But I see it so clearly now. I can just see that I've been prepared for what I'm doing. And I'm making a difference in thousands and thousands of lives.
And you're also teaching what the lessons you learned from prisoners to business leaders now.
Yes. Leadership lessons, sales, I speak at a lot of think sales conference here in Cape Town, because if you're not whole and people don't see you as somebody that's 100% together, then you won't be able to sell much. Someone needs to look up to you to buy your product. And unless you're whole, 100%, no unforgiveness, fully grateful for everything, I'm walking in confidence. Yes.
And this is the journey you also telling us about in your new book, Beating the Chains.
Yeah, beating chains. Yeah. Obviously, Linda, there's so much in the book that I can't talk about. And the foreword was done by Ian Mack, the former Springbok rugby coach. And he grew up with my dad in Bulawayo and followed my rugby all the way through, which was a great honor to have him do my foreword. But the book is, it sold thousands and thousands, and I can't keep up. And we're in the process of doing a movie as well. So that's going very well. It's going to have a spiritual genre with conservation twist to it. So I'm very excited about that.
So are you playing yourself in that movie?
No. We're looking at the guy who played Angus Buck in Faith Like Potatoes, Frank Rodenbach. We're talking with Frank. He's really keen to play me. And the other two main characters, so we'll have three characters. One was a poacher that I actually put in prison, and I found him in there, which is ironic, and what he went through. So, and what makes a person become a poacher. And I think the educational side of that will have a huge impact. The other one was a very cruel guard, one of the prison guards. But people didn't know. We knew his background, but he was just exceptionally cruel. The beatings were unimaginable, Linda. I mean, it's in the book. I watched a guard kill a guy in front of me, hit him on the back of the head with a baton stick. It was unreal. But that guard, at 15, he was abducted from school during the war by the liberators and trained to be a terrorist and trained to kill people. And then when the war finished, then he was just chucked into the prison service. So he was an angry, bitter, and all he did was kill people. So these were the people that were looking after us. Because 90% of those prison wardens or prison guards are all from the military, from ex-soldiers. So there's no rehabilitation at all.
Well, Rusty, I'm looking forward to reading your story. And it's just amazing, how you could still have hope and be so positive, and forgiveness and the lessons you have for all of us in that. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
No, Linda, it's a pleasure. And, the Lord's been a big part of that, Linda. I got lost during the war in Rhodesia, during the war, and I was only 18. And I never grew up with a religious background, never prayed or anything. And I was in a very dangerous area um, to do with the war and with lions and hyena in the area. And I was all alone, no shirt, no shoes, just a rifle in my hand and no hat. And late one evening, that evening, I got on my knees and I prayed for the first time on a mountain. And this feeling of like warm water being poured over me and a total sense of calmness. And what happened after that, I mean, it's a long story, but I walked to the road where we led. I was in a very, very desolate place. There was no roads or fences or anything anywhere near, and totally undeveloped in 79. So it was wild back then. And I never told anyone what happened on that mountain that day. And then they put me on death row while I was in prison for a cell phone story. And I did have a cell phone, but they couldn't find it. And on death row, they put me in a dark cell. So the dark cell, well, first of all, they put me into solitary confinement for 2 years. That was also for a cell phone story. And I did have the cell phone, but they couldn't find it again. And they put me in there for 2 years, but I still got a cell phone back. It was one of those cheap Nokia cell phones. And I had guards charging it for me and everything. And then a girlfriend, an old girlfriend of mine, wrote a letter saying, your son, I was talking to you on the phone the other night, your sound so positive. And it went through security. So they knew I had a phone and they did the search, but I had hidden the phone and they couldn't find it. So they put me on death row in what they call the dark cell. So my solitary confinement cell and the death row cells are identical. They're 3 meters by 1 meter by 3 meters, and there's no window, there's only a vent. And the dark cell had a staircase built over the vent. So it was pitch black in there because the electric light didn't work as well. So they used to put guys in there to break them. And they put me in there to try and make me tell them what the guard's name was. Because I said, no, I used the guard's phone. So they said, well, what's his name? I said, I couldn't remember. And then I'd parade, identification parades and everything. And I said, no, there's no one here. Anyway, that I recognize. And on day 6, Linda, in that dark cell, I was only allowed out 5 minutes in the morning to clean my teeth, 5 minutes at 10 o'clock to have a shower, and 5 minutes at 3 o'clock to prepare for lockup. So it was cold, lonely, and dark for 23 hours, 45 minutes a day, like being buried alive. I mean, I couldn't even see my hand. And on day 6, I got on my knees and I prayed again. And I felt that same feeling like on the mountain. And I knew everything was going to be fine. And 30 minutes later, I faintly heard my Afrikaans mate shouting from the soccer ground, hey, Russ, everything's okay, my mate. Don't worry, everything's okay. So I jumped up. I said, hey, Phil. He said, don't worry, Russ, everything's okay. And I'm trying to cut it short, but I lay down within 10 minutes to unlock my door, took me to the officer in charge. And his exact words were, he said, hello, Russ. I said, hello, officer. He said, have you remembered the guy's name yet? I said, no, officer. He said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave it in God's hands. You can go back to your cell. And at the exact moment when I was praying, my sister was paying him $200 to get me out of there. And that was a big turning point in my spiritual walk, because I'd prayed many times in prison, nothing happened, nothing changed. And like I say, I wasn't a Christian, but I'd had that encounter with the Lord when I got lost. So, I mean, I still didn't go home for 2.5 years after that death row experience, and which tested me again, all these things the whole time going through your mind. And when I came out of prison, I mean, I'd lost everything, and everyone was 10 years ahead. And I just thought, if God's here, then, how come I'm like this? But cut a long story short, Linda, it ended up with many other spiritual experiences. And 4 years ago, I gave my life to the Lord completely. I stopped drinking. I always enjoyed a good party, being a rugby player and in the safari business. But I I could never have imagined the peace and happiness that I now experience every day. And I don't have anything like I used to have. And yeah, it's a lesson. You won't find peace unless you find Jesus.
Rusty Labuschagne, thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda. I appreciate it.